That's because we've all been exposed to the 3K microwave. Matvey said this is the primal force of the universe. Now he can generate it to alter our genes. He can change Xiaoxian's genes too. He can make her however he wants, as long as she survives. I'll take any version of her. I have to find Matvey. Thank you. And Lang turned and ran out. Elena watched him yank open the door to dash outside, then called coldly after his back. Dr. Matvey has gone to Malaysia. The lower-level R&D center won't let you in, and Lang froze with his hand on the door. Suddenly, he remembered he'd just returned from Singapore to New York. If Matvey was also in Malaysia, maybe he'd trigger an earthquake to collapse Southeast Asia's economic structure, but his mind was too chaotic to think clearly. He turned around and said, "Help me power up the 35K microwave. I'll bring Xiaoxian here for a test. At least let us try. I don't have the password. According to the contract, only he can activate it. The company owns the research results, but the password is in his hands. And your gene mutations are concentrated at the longevity locus. That doesn't mean others will respond the same way. With only 2 samples, it's statistically insufficient to draw scientific conclusions. Plus, cancer cells exist inside her body and they'll also be exposed to the radiation. You might not believe it, but there's a very high chance the cancer cells, not Xiaoxian, will become long-lived. There's a 99% probability the radiation will worsen the cancer. I haven't had time to study this aspect yet because you already withdrew. I don't even know what to research anymore." Dejected, and Liang walked out of the room. Elena exhaled a hazy plume of smoke toward his retreating figure and drained the bitter coffee he'd left behind in one gulp. In the pre-dawn hours, Singapore was already sweltering. And Yun wore a thin, gauzy long tunic, her head covered with a hijab commonly worn by Muslim women. Standing beside her on a small sampan was Jing. From afar, the combination of Chinese-style attire and Islamic headscarf made them appear like ordinary Muslim women. At each end of the boat sat a plainclothes soldier rowing slowly with wooden oars. They drifted gently through the middle of the Johor Strait, which spanned over 1,200 meters wide. And Yun had insisted they use only a wooden boat, forbidding any engine on board. The soldiers were allowed only wooden paddles and a single pistol each to ensure the accuracy of her Feng Shui compass. The Johor Strait separated Malaysia and Singapore, 2 nations bound by decades of rivalry yet inseparably intertwined. Though bilateral relations weren't overtly tense and citizens moved freely between them, political and economic disputes over resources and interests never ceased. To ethnic Chinese, Singapore's strong-handed government offered a sense of security. To Malays, these Chinese were like a stubborn bone lodged in Southeast Asia's throat. Even today, many couldn't understand what madness had possessed Malaysia's former prime minister to cede such strategically vital land to the Chinese, allowing them to establish an independent nation, especially since this land, called Singapore, was precisely the dragon's lair of Southeast Asia. An Yun had boarded the boat only because An Liang had woken her from sleep with a phone call. His voice had been low and despondent. Speaking hurriedly while driving home. After briefly explaining Li Xiaoxian's condition, he delivered urgent news. Matvey had gone to Malaysia. But An Liang admitted his emotions were too unstable to extract more details from Elena. Both pieces of news stunned An Yun deeply. She sensed An Liang's anguish, yet admired how he'd still managed to stay calm enough to call her and relay Matvey's whereabouts, a rare composure under such pain. Returning to America immediately wouldn't save Li Xiaoxian. Brain cancer was universally known as incurable, beyond the reach of any esoteric art. She gave An Liang only one instruction. No matter what happens, never leave Xiaoxian's side, not even for a moment. Years ago, An Yun had lost her husband. She knew the agony of losing a loved one, the deepest regret being not having spent enough time together. She understood the fear and loneliness that accompany death, and how the presence of someone who loves you can warm your final steps, giving you courage to face the end. Saving a life is the greatest act of kindness in this world, but accompanying a loved one with care as they depart is the ultimate compassion. Li Xiaoxian would eventually leave An Liang. But if the 2 young people cherished every second from now on, their lives would not have been wasted. The news of Matvey in Malaysia instantly reminded An Yun of the Kan hexagram Jing had calculated at the Ministry of Defense. With Matvey's involvement, previously isolated events now formed a coherent chain. An Yun no longer believed the earthquake experiment in Gumu village 6 months ago had been randomly chosen. She now saw it as Matvey's field test of the Malay Peninsula's geological tolerance to seismic activity. Regardless of who selected the epicenter, that location lay along the most critical dragon vein shared by both nations. Matvey's return to Malaysia was certainly no coincidence. It was part of a long-planned sequence set in motion years ago by the David Group. Matvey had merely changed employers, but with iron resolve he continued engineering the next seismic crisis. In this race against time, An Yun didn't wait for dawn. She immediately called Zhang Jiwen, presenting An Liang's intelligence and her own deductions. "Mr. Zhang, I'm now absolutely certain Sister Jing's hexagram reading was correct. Matvey's earthquake machine must be activated underground. The Zhen trigram she found hidden beneath the mountain doesn't signify an explosion inside a building. It means triggering an earthquake within the Earth's crust. His machine can make quakes appear as natural disasters, with precise targeting and distance control. He could topple just a Parliament Hall or flatten all of Singapore." Zhang Jiwen scrambled out of bed, dressing as he spoke into the phone. "But agents are already searching the strait and Johor waters daily. What else can I possibly do?" And Yun replied with crisp clarity. "Matvey's invention, combined with Elena's secret techniques, forms a new kind of high-tech Feng Shui. But Mr. An Liang has already uncovered its key. We can use traditional Chinese Feng Shui to locate them." Since we might pinpoint their hideout at any moment, you must stay awake for at least the next few days. Immediately mobilize Singapore's internal firefighting and disaster relief units. We might fail, and then Singapore will need massive rescue operations also. Assemble financial experts and prepare sufficient capital to counter incoming hedge fund attacks. If we contain the terrorist threat, their financial assault will only intensify. Finally, Yun thought for a moment and added, give me a standby special ops team and find me a sampan. To avoid drawing attention from Malaysian authorities, and to conceal the 2 large Beretta M9 automatic pistols tucked under her arms, Sister Jing had also changed into a dark yellow Islamic robe, her long hair covered by a headscarf edged in blue. She held her breath as she carefully cradled the Feng Shui compass. Beside her, Yun stood quietly, flipping through a notebook under the faint morning light just beginning to break across the sky. The notebook belonged to Liang, filled with his field notes from projects handled by Elena. Inside were his on-site observations, analyzed clues, and reflections. Liang had concluded that Elena's site selection techniques closely aligned with the ancient secrets of the Dragon Manual, specifically the Dragon Control Manual. In Imperial Feng Shui, the Dragon Control Manual was used not to overthrow dynasties like the Dragon Severing Manual, but to subtly dominate a nation's dragon veins, forcing its people into endless toil without ever realizing they were being systematically drained. Under this scheme, citizens would struggle daily just to survive, yet their labor would invisibly enrich the true rulers positioned at the heart of the Dragon Control Formation. Trapped in this cycle, people became like beasts of burden, too exhausted to resist tyranny and too numb to aspire to anything higher. Unlike the Dragon Severing Manual's overt destruction of royal power, the Dragon Control Manual offered a far more economical and efficient method of long-term domination. That was why Liang had meticulously documented local living conditions in his notes. Elena's projects spanned dozens of developing countries, nations plagued by corruption and foreign interference, yet somehow always teetering on the edge of collapse without ever actually falling. Their governments remained in place, too weak to govern well, but too insignificant for major powers to bother removing. In his notebook, Liang wrote, overthrowing these governments is meaningless. Only by turning corrupt regimes into puppets of hidden powerful rulers can maximum long-term profit be extracted. This is the conspiracy of the Dragon Control Manual and Elena's ultimate goal. The patterns described in the notes match strikingly with Beijing's Long Lock Formation, the anchoring point of Malaysia's Central Range, and even the Feng Shui characteristics of the ancient holy city of Jerusalem. At this point, Yun could only conclude that this was not merely Elena's plot. Elena's site selection arts and Matvei's artificial earthquakes were merely tools, perhaps just the tip of the iceberg, in a vast organization's global scheme of technological Feng Shui-driven enslavement. Now, Yun and Sister Jing drifted alone in a tiny sampan at the center of the wide, calm Johor Strait. They instructed the special ops team to row slowly, inch by inch, toward the central axis of the strongest dragon chi, the precise line where the Hongbang Gorge channeled its energy. Based on Elena's consistent dragon-locking methods, Matvei's technique of embedding the particle resonance machine directly into the dragon vein stratum like a dragon nail, and Sister Jing's calculation of the Can hexagram, the machine had to be located precisely at the intersection of the Johor Strait and the dragon vein, very likely right beneath their small boat. Sister Jing focused intently on the compass in her hands. The sampan rocked gently, yet the needle remained steady, pointing firmly north-south, but as they drew closer to the dragon vein, the needle began to tremble slightly. "GG," Sister Jing whispered. The needle's shaking, and Yun glanced at the compass and told the 2 agents, keep the sampan steady as you row toward the opposite shore, slowly. The boat crept further toward Malaysia. Dawn brightened the sky, and the Causeway Bridge, the only link between the 2 nations, grew busy with traffic. Yet no one on the sampan dared breathe loudly, afraid even the slightest movement might disturb the compass readings. "Master," and one agent said nervously, "the exact center of the strait is the international border. We can't just drift across it to draw fire from Malaysian border guards. We're already very visible." Sister Jing extended the compass over the gunwale. But once we crossed the border, the needle started swinging more violently. And Yun considered this. Seeing only a small grove of trees on the far shore, she ordered the agents row across. The sampan pressed forward. It was a risky move, but Yun wanted to see for herself who would emerge to stop them. Border troops or terrorists. If Matvei really was hiding beneath the strait, he'd surely be watching through surveillance. He'd shown deep interest in Feng Shui and had collaborated with Liang on research projects. Even if he didn't recognize Yun, he'd certainly recognize the Feng Shui compass. The presence of a Feng Shui master might pressure him enough to act, and if he rushed to intercept them, that would play right into her hands. Relations between the 2 countries seemed amicable. Even as the sampan neared the Malaysian shore, no border patrol appeared. And Yun knew well the legal nuances. Drifting unintentionally across a shared maritime boundary was common, especially for such a small vessel carried by currents. If stopped, they could easily explain it away, but stepping onto land would constitute actual illegal entry, and there was no need for that when she could simply cross legally via the bridge. Still, she directed the sampan to the shoreline, following the compass's tremors to search for clues. Sister Jing kept murmuring updates. "The swing is decreasing, move back a bit. Master, there's a pipe here," one agent reported, uncovering a massive concrete tube buried underground. The pipe lay submerged just below the waterline, topped by a cement platform marked with letters and numbers. Sister Jing looked up in disbelief. No way, it's this easy. The other agent frowned. Master, could we be wrong? These markings belong to Malaysia's power utility. This is just part of their submarine cable system. And Yoon whispered, it's definitely here. Strong electric currents create electromagnetic fields that make the needle sway, but they don't make it spin. Both agents stood up curiously to watch Sister Jing's compass. The needle spun so fast it blurred like a fan, then gradually slowed and stopped. They exchanged glances. Suddenly, and Yoon smiled faintly. Retreat quickly, we've successfully been discovered. Meanwhile, Matvey was busy in a cramped workshop. The tunnel was narrow, understaffed, and critically short on power. The particle resonance machine required immense energy from a nuclear reactor to generate intense 35K microwaves capable of triggering earthquakes at the Dragon Vein's core. But space underground was too limited, and the machine itself was too large. Electricity siphoned from a miniature nuclear reactor barely met the machine's minimum needs. This was a covert operation. Tapping into submarine power cables would trigger immediate detection, and borrowing electricity from nearby factories would be even riskier. So every non-essential device in the workshop had been shut down. All primary power was now dedicated solely to the nuclear reactor. Matvey had anticipated this possibility from the start. He'd included backup generators in his initial plan, and now they were all lined up at the tunnel entrance. Yet he hadn't dared to switch them on, fearing the vibrations and noise would alert Singaporean authorities. Matvey's tall, lean frame moved easily through the workshop. With too few technicians on hand, he often handled basic tasks himself, but he didn't mind. As long as he could precisely level half of Singapore, he'd stamp his invention with the seal of perfection. And if it wasn't perfect, no problem. He'd recalibrate, trigger another quake, and repeat until it was done. That was Matvey's will. Mas Salamat and his prayer group stood guard over the tunnel. As the regional leader of Al-Qaeda in Southeast Asia, he'd communicated with the cat multiple times. If luck had favored him, Singapore would have become rubble 7 years ago, right after New York's Twin Towers fell. Perhaps Allah simply disapproved of his terrorist acts, or maybe his skills were lacking. Despite numerous grandiose plans, none had ever succeeded. Worse, the time he'd spent in prison was beginning to rival his time in freedom, a serious setback for achieving ultimate victory in jihad. Now in his 40s, Mas Salamat was desperate to accomplish something monumental before ascending to paradise. The cat had given him that chance. With the cat's help, he'd escaped prison and fled straight to Malaysia to join a new holy war. At first, he couldn't understand why this crusade against decadent imperialism required partnering with a white man. But once he grasped that earthquakes wielded far greater destructive power than suicide bombers or hijacked planes, his fanaticism instantly resonated with Matvey's. The cat had even granted Mas Salamat a prestigious honor. He alone would detonate the nuclear reactor at the climax of the operation. If the earthquake succeeded, he could retreat to a safe distance and admire the mushroom cloud. If it failed, he held the right to decide when to ascend to heaven alongside the reactor. Matvey retained that same authority, but Mas Salamat didn't care. This method suited a leader far better than strapping grenades to his chest and storming a public square, yet Matvey felt no kinship with terrorists or with anyone, for that matter. His sole devotion was to his invention. Everything else was irrelevant. He'd questioned why the company hadn't hired professional security like in the past. Their reply was clear. After the earthquake plan succeeded, the equipment here couldn't be moved. It would have to be destroyed on site, triggering a nuclear explosion. If Al-Qaeda handled the final detonation, history would record the disaster as a terrorist attack, absolving the company of all blame. Matvey understood the company's intent, though he neither understood nor cared to understand terrorists. He barred the fighters from entering the workshop. Only the deepest chamber of the tunnel received independent power. The hundreds of meters outside lay pitch black. Where the terrorists waited, candlelight flickered against walls lined with advanced surveillance gear, now useless without electricity. Just as dawn broke, perimeter guards spotted a small wooden boat drifting across the Johor Strait. On board were 2 men and 2 women, the latter standing upright in Islamic robes. Only when the boat crossed the maritime border into Singaporean waters did the guards suspect something unusual. They rushed to alert Mas Salamat topside. They weren't overly reliant on modern surveillance anyway. The power outage didn't trouble Mas Salamat. He knew modern communication tools were double-edged swords. While they enabled easy coordination among allies, they also made it simple for enemies to trace signals and pinpoint locations. Even Al-Qaeda's leaders in Afghanistan had evaded US capture for years precisely by avoiding radios altogether. But this time, Mas Salamat miscalculated. By the time he reached the shore, the boat was nearly upon him. One petite woman held a Feng Shui compass, while the other alternated between checking the compass and consulting a notebook, clearly conducting some kind of survey. Having grown up in Malaysia and later acquired Singaporean citizenship, Mas Salamat was familiar with Feng Shui practices common in both countries. Using a compass wasn't odd, but seeing women in Islamic attire doing it was deeply suspicious. He exchanged a few words with a guard, who immediately raised his rifle to fire at the boat. Mas Salamat stopped him, ordering him instead to report to Matvey. After phoning the Malaysian Border Patrol to raise the alarm, Mas Salamat switched off his phone and retreated to observe developments from a distance. Minutes later, over a dozen Border Patrol off-road motorcycles roared onto the shoreline. By then, the boat had already retreated back to the middle of the strait. Through loudspeakers, the patrol issued stern warnings, prompting the small vessel to withdraw fully into Singaporean waters. When Mas Salamat returned to the tunnel's depths, All power had been cut. The workshop's iron door hung half open, engulfed in darkness except for the glow of a single laptop illuminating Matvey's pale gray-haired face, making him look like a vampire risen from the Middle Ages. Matvey turned to face Mas Salamat, waiting for him to speak. In Matvey's eyes, this short, stocky Malay man was merely a devout believer. He'd never seen any sign of terrorist tendencies in him. Mas Salamat handed Matvey an electronic telescope. "Doctor, these were the people just now. Do you recognize them?" The device could record video. After watching the footage for a moment, Matvey asked coldly, "Why didn't you tell me they were Feng Shui masters? Your soldier only said someone came to conduct tests." Mas Salamat frowned in confusion. They were indeed testing something. The border patrol has already driven them off, and our location remains secure. Does it really matter whether they're Feng Shui masters? Matvey muttered idiot under his breath, then ordered a technician to restart the system. With a dismissive wave, he gestured for Mas Salamat to leave the workshop. Humiliated without understanding why, Mas Salamat seethed with suppressed rage. Matvey's arrogance left him grinding his teeth but utterly powerless. The moment Matvey saw the wooden boat and compass in the recording, he realized they'd come specifically for Feng Shui reconnaissance. He recalled that the timing between Mas Salamat's departure and the border patrol's arrival coincided exactly with his own shutdown of the system. He'd fallen for their trap. When first alerted, he'd assumed they were cable inspectors, so he immediately powered down to halt microwave emissions. That way, no detector could pick up anything. Even if brief instrument malfunctions occurred during restart, technicians would blame faulty equipment, never suspecting radiation. But when Matvey saw the elegant Chinese woman smiling as she directed the small boat to leave after he'd powered down his device, he knew she was highly skilled. He and An Liang understood each other well. Perhaps no one in the world grasped Feng Shui principles as deeply as he did. He knew very well that within a strong radiation zone, a lupin compass would exhibit needle-spinning behavior. If the spinning didn't stop, a Feng Shui master might be puzzled, but if it stopped precisely at the right moment, it meant only one thing. The magnetic field was under deliberate human control. Matvey recognized Sister Jing, so the beautiful woman beside her had to be An Liang's mother. After a brief moment of thought, he tucked his laptop under his arm, walked into an open-air grove, connected to the network, and typed a message into the chat box, exposed. Request immediate action. Number 120 Wall Street faced the East River directly. The 23rd floor of this building had once housed the David Group. Now it served as headquarters for the United Americas Engineering Group. And Lang's Humvee was parked on the Riverside Road beneath 120 Wall Street. He and Li Shouxian sat inside, watching another building across the street. Liu Zhongtang was driving today because An Lang needed to stay in the back seat to care for Li Shouxian. They held hands and Li Shouxian leaned her head gently against An Lang's shoulder, smiling faintly but gazing ahead with unfocused eyes. Liu Zhongtang rested his chin in his palm, scanning the surroundings from time to time. Waiting for Daniel to appear not long after, a sleek black BMW limousine roared past them ostentatiously and screeched to a halt right in front of Metropolitan Bank Tower, the very spot An Liang's team was monitoring. Out popped Daniel round as a barrel, stepping out from the passenger seat with a fat cigar clamped between his grinning teeth. Though dressed in designer suits, his undone top button and thick gold chain made him look more like a Colombian drug lord than a financier. A blonde woman emerged from the driver's seat and An Liang immediately chuckled. "Wow, Xiaoxian, Danny really found himself a blonde model for a girlfriend. Really? Long hair or short?" "Long hair, but her skirt's super short." Heh. Liu Zhongtang picked up his phone and said, "Zhang, follow that black guy and find out which floor he goes to." No sooner had he hung up than a Chinese courier in uniform appeared, carrying a cardboard box. He trailed behind the rotund black man who had his arm around the blonde model, both squeezing into the elevator together. Li Xiaoxian was in a playful mood, and An Lang teased her affectionately, "I've got a blonde girlfriend too, you know. Look at her. Even her skin is bronze, so sexy. Hey, I heard black girls have even smoother skin. Ow, don't hit my face." If you became a model, you'd instantly start an Asian fashion trend in New York, and all those white models would lose their jobs. Li Xiaoxian laughed and waved two $20 bills in her hand. "Who do you think will win? We'll find out soon enough." Many members of the Hongmen operated street businesses in Lower Manhattan. As the Hongmen secretary, essentially the modern-day equivalent of an ancient strategist, Liu Zhongtang had issued a single command, mobilizing every brother in the area to track Daniel's movements. By the next morning, they already had solid intel. Daniel had been seen entering the Metropolitan Bank Tower. Upon hearing this, An Liang immediately challenged Liu Zhongtang to a bet. He wagered that Daniel's hedge fund occupied the 23rd floor of the building. If it wasn't the 23rd floor, he'd pay Liu Zhongtang $20. Liu Zhongtang knew An Liang must have spotted something through Feng Shui layout analysis. The way he proposed the bet showed absolute confidence. Still, Liu couldn't believe An Liang's Feng Shui skills were truly superior to his own. If even Master Liu couldn't detect the pattern, what could An Liang possibly see? Well, fine, let's bet. If he lost, he'd treat it as buying candy for kids. His phone rang again. A crisp voice on the other end reported just one number. "Boss 23. An Liang snatched the two bills from Li Xiaoxian's hand and burst into laughter. "Hit the jackpot. Ice cream guy. Don't think I just won $20 from you. I've already won everything." Liu Zhongtang didn't care about a mere $20 bill. He turned his head expressionlessly and said, "This $20 is just for you to show off a little. If you're happy, go ahead and tell me how you figured it out. If you don't, I'll assume you just got lucky by accident. And Liang replied, I know you can't decipher this Feng Shui formation because you studied orthodox Yanggong Feng Shui. You only know how to help the poor and save lives, not how to wage battles or set traps. That's why I've never worried about you running out of money. Yang Yunsong, the Tang dynasty's grand master of Feng Shui, was famously known as Yang the savior of the poor. If his methods don't bring wealth, whose would? I also study Yanggong Feng Shui, so I always have food on my table too. Liu Zhongtong kept staring at Liang's mouth. After a while, he couldn't help but interrupt. You're chattering like a flock of ducks. Are you trying to change the subject? I'm just excited because I've learned something new recently. You should understand that. And Liang said enthusiastically, I'm telling you this only because you're a Hongman elder and one of us. Swear you won't tell anyone else. Liu Zhongtong roared. Just spit it out already. The Dragon Manual's Feng Shui aligns with Elena's secret techniques. Every project Elena touches shows traces of Feng Shui arrangement. I don't know what they call it in Kabbalah, but according to the Dragon Manual, it's called locking the dragon method. Ice cream guy. I want to hear your take on the Feng Shui of this intersection right here. Once you've said your piece, I'll tell you exactly how I saw it. Liu Zhongtong knew New York's geography like the back of his hand. Having personally arranged layouts for all Hongman-affiliated businesses and shops, he naturally gained deep insight into the city's entire Feng Shui landscape. Without hesitation, he declared, this is Wall Street's Mingtang, the convergence of dragon and tiger energies. It's the best Feng Shui spot possible. That's why Metropolitan Bank stood firm during the subprime crisis. Anyone can see this basic Feng Shui pattern at a glance. Though Li Xiaoqin couldn't see, she remembered Wall Street as a steep slope descending from west to east, a mere half-kilometer stretch lined with towering banks and financial institutions like a canyon built entirely of dollar bills. Curious, she asked the two masters. Wall Street is the global financial center. Does that mean the Feng Shui uphill isn't good? And Lang echoed her question with equal curiosity. Yeah, is the uphill Feng Shui really bad? Liu Zhongtong frowned at Lang's teasing expression. Both were Feng Shui practitioners. Why ask such a beginner-level question unless he was provoking trouble? But then he noticed Lang glancing toward Li Xiaoqin and instantly understood. Despite the urgency of their next move, Lang wanted Li Xiaoqin to learn everything she wished to know, ensuring she felt neither delayed nor ignored. He wanted her remaining days to be filled with joy, as if nothing were wrong, chatting happily with everyone around her. Liu Zhongtong turned abruptly, pushed Liang backward until his head rested against Li Xiaoqin's shoulder, sprawling sideways across the rear seat. Li Xiaoqin, bewildered by what Liu Zhongtong was doing, giggled uncontrollably. Liu Zhongtong tapped Liang's forehead twice with his knuckles and said, Wall Street is a long slope. Just like Liang's current state, his forehead is the highest point. Right here runs Broadway, the central dragon vein axis of New York. The dragon chi surges straight through this line. The highest end of Wall Street. At this point, Liu Zhongtong tapped Liang's head 2 more times. And Liang winced and shot him an annoyed glance. But he didn't curse. He knew Li Xiaoqin had lost her sight, and only through these taps could she hear. Liu Zhongtong continued. The highest end is a spire-topped church. This church intercepts New York's dragon chi because behind it lies a vast cemetery. In Feng Shui, cemeteries generate unexpected wealth, so the dragon chi transforms into financial energy, pouring down Wall Street from top to bottom. Li Xiaoqin nodded and said, I've also heard a saying, on Wall Street there are only 2 exits, one leads to a graveyard, the other to a river. And Liang chimed in cheekily, the truth of capitalism. Liu Zhongtong patted Liang's chest and said, the financial energy flows downward from the highest point along a narrow path, passing through Bank of Manhattan and Morgan Stanley, until it reaches a small flat area here. And Liang interrupted again. Old overseas Chinese still remember arriving in America. Morgan Stanley moved uptown ages ago. Ignoring Liang's comment, Liu Zhongtong slapped his palm firmly onto Liang's chest, cutting off the chatter, and went on. This spot is Wall Street's small Mingtang. According to Yanggong Feng Shui, it's the most auspicious and prosperous true dragon acupoint. That's why the New York Stock Exchange and Federal Hall stand opposite each other across a tiny intersection, one symbolizing the origin of American finance, the other, the origin of American politics. It's an exceptionally powerful world-class Mingtang. Li Xiaoqian asked, what about the Feng Shui further down? This time Liang was ready. He tensed his abs into 6 defined blocks. Liu Rongtong smacked his belly with a loud thwack-thwack. Xiaoxian, past the small Mingtang comes a steep slope, slanting all the way from your stomach down to your knees. Banks located here carry some risk. Normally, Wall Street benefits from the church's ability to transform chi into wealth, creating an overall prosperous layout. But because different sections of the street have varying slopes, their fortunes differ. Gentle slopes receive steady chi flow. They make big profits in good years and avoid losses in bad ones. But banks and firms on steep slopes experience wild swings. When annual chi turns unfavorable, entire clusters collapse. I've witnessed several financial crises myself. Most failed banks were on slope streets. In Feng Shui, such slopes are called flowing waterland, places where water drains too fast and wealth chi can't be retained. There's an old verse. First, never settle on flowing water land. It brings instant ruin to family fortune. A Liang, playing the eager quiz show host, pressed, and the second rule? Second, avoid sword-spine dragons, for they bring death to the master. Lang declared dramatically in an authoritative tone. Ice cream guy, full marks, making Li Xiaoqian burst into laughter. Lang clicked his heels together, producing a sharp clack-clack from his dress shoes, signaling to Li Xiaoqian that this was the end of Wall Street. The other prime location on Wall Street is right here at the East River's edge. 10 years ago, when I helped David and Danny pick a spot to start their company, I paid an exorbitant rent to secure a tiny office here. Eventually, it grew into a whole group buying out an entire floor. This area is the lowest point of Wall Street. The East River ahead halts the outflow of financial energy, and its calm waters form a grand Ming Tang. Buildings like 120 Wall Street and the Metropolitan Bank Tower use the entire sloping street and surrounding structures as their backing mountain. With such massive support behind them, the fierce surge of unexpected wealth rushing down the slope has mellowed over distance into gentle prosperity. Combined with the East River's wealth-gathering Ming Tang, this becomes the best Feng Shui spot on Wall Street. Li Xiaoxian hugged An Liang's head to her chest adoringly and said, "You're amazing." Grinning, An Liang sat up and said, "Ice cream guy is a Hongmen Feng Shui master. I'm a Wall Street Feng Shui master. Of course I understand this place better. At least half the businesses on this street are my clients." Hey, that's where I met Dada, back then. After doing Feng Shui readings, I'd always grab coffee by the East River. That fat guy was a trader for one of my clients. We kept bumping into each other here. He was super generous, always treating me to meals. After enough dinners, we became drinking buddies. His voice and eyes softened slightly as he mentioned Daniel. Daniel had once heroically saved Li Xiaoxian. He was practically her savior. So Li Xiaoxian smiled warmly and said, "I like Dada too. He's a great friend." Liu Zhongtang turned and said, "Tell me about the 23rd floor. I'm going into Wall Street with Xiaoxian to find someone. Come along, we'll talk as we walk." Liu Zhongtang glanced at Kuko sitting obediently in the passenger seat, tilting her head to watch everyone in turn. He shook his head. "No, I'd better not. Bringing the dog might disturb your conversation. Coco and I will play by the riverside and wait for you to return." An Liang held Li Xiaoxian's hand and said, "That works. This layout is called As Your Dragon Sipping Water. See how Wall Street connects perpendicularly with Broadway, the dragon vein of New York. It actually spawns a branch of unexpected wealth dragon chi that races down the slope straight toward the East River. If the East River flowed swiftly, this dragon would plunge in and drift away, becoming As Your Dragon entering water, and Wall Street's prosperity would vanish entirely. But the river's outflow is guarded by Governor's Island and the Statue of Liberty, and this stretch of the East River is especially calm. Thus, the dragon chi doesn't leak away, forming the As Your Dragon Sipping Water formation." Liu Zhongtang nodded. "I went up there myself back then and immediately understood your design. But what does this have to do with the opposing building's floor level?" An Liang picked up Cuckoo, turned her around so her rear faced him, and gently tugged both her ears. To the left at Wall Street's end stands 120 Wall Street. To the right, the Metropolitan Bank Tower. These two buildings are the Azure Dragon's horns guarding the entire street, according to the Dragon Manual. Whoever controls this point can dominate Wall Street as easily as riding a beast and grabbing its ears. I've analyzed all of Elena's site selection plans and realized she aims to seize critical power nodes along both sides of the dragon vein. Liu Zhongtang's eyes lit up with realization. So that's it. The 23rd floor is currently the most auspicious under heavenly timing. That's why you secured it 10 years ago. If the cat had already occupied the 23rd floor in the opposite tower, they'd naturally try to take the 23rd floor of 120 Wall Street too, creating a dragon-locking Feng Shui formation. From the very beginning, the cat wasn't just trying to eliminate David, they wanted to seize David Group's 23rd floor. Elena infiltrated David Group with that goal set from day one. An Liang gently patted Zhao Xian's head and said, "Yes, this is a decade-long conspiracy. They're trying to control the entire Wall Street. Has Sister Jing ever told you about what happened in Beijing?" Liu Zhongtang shook his head. An Liang continued, "Beijing was also caught in such a dragon lock formation, and the target locked onto was Zhongnan Hai, China's political center. They really don't hold back." "What organization set this up?" "Who else? The America's United Group and Metropolitan Bank. One on each side, pinning down the Maoyu directional void line of Zhongnan Hai. That chi-draining wealth-stealing technique they used is utterly ruthless. So the moment I heard Dada worked at the Metropolitan Bank Tower, I knew something big was wrong. If their Beijing branch alone dares to target China's financial system and strike at Zhongnan Hai, imagine what their New York headquarters must be plotting against Wall Street, trying to hijack the whole world. Xiaoxian, you remember that satellite image Yunjie showed us, right? The dragon lock principle there is exactly the same as here." A faint smile lingered on Li Xiaoxian's face as she asked apologetically, "Ah, what satellite image? Did Yunji really show us one?" An Liang replied casually, "Of course. Back when we'd just arrived on Java Island in Indonesia, they were still in Beijing then." Li Xiaoxian's smile slowly faded. She repeated blankly, "Java Island? Have we ever been to Java Island?" An Liang and Liu Zhongtang froze. Brain cancer could impair any bodily function. It was entirely possible it had already caused memory loss. If Li Xiaoxian couldn't recall being on Java Island just half a month ago, she might even forget what she'd eaten for breakfast today. The sudden silence made Li Xiaoxian deeply uncomfortable. She gave a self-deprecating little laugh and instinctively reached into her handbag, but stopped herself immediately. An Liang gently wrapped an arm around her and asked softly, "What do you want to take out? Let me get it for you." He followed her hand into the bag and felt her tightly gripping a notebook. As he slowly pulled it out, her smile vanished completely. An Liang quickly flipped through a few pages, then handed it to Liu Zhongtang. Liu saw the last entry, which read, May 21, 2008. Tomorrow, Liang will go to City Hall Plaza to look for someone to help track Dada's whereabouts. Target: Liu Zhongtang, male, 33 years old, white paper fan, secretary of the Hongman, usually wears a big beard, but might shave it off, be careful not to misidentify him. Liu drives an ice cream van that plays symphonic music. Find the van. Find him often works within Jing, Sister Jing, Liang's younger sister, on church charity projects. Owns a Shih Tzu named Coco. Coco is gentle and obedient. Remember to wear socks, comb hair, bring vomit bag, tissues, painkillers, phone, keys, wallet, coins, tissues, vomit bag, wear socks, comb hair, set alarm for 8 a.m. now and reread this note after waking up. The final line read, each ice cream sells for 1.75. The densely packed page was filled with details about people and daily routines that should have been second nature, like a dementia patient's reminder sheet. Liu Zhongtang understood everything now. Li Xiaoxian's memory had been deteriorating for a while. Once she realized it, she started writing daily journal entries to remind herself, desperately trying to live and socialize like a normal person. She had to write constantly and check constantly. Now blind for several days without access to her notes, she was forgetting not just small things but major events too. Liu Zhongtang glanced worriedly at An Liang and gave a slight shake of his head, signaling him not to react too strongly. An Liang blinked hard, tears nearly spilling from his eyes. He quickly slipped the notebook back into Li Xiaoxian's handbag and said brightly, "Wow, your Chinese handwriting is way prettier than Sister Jing's, so elegant. We're getting off now to meet an old friend." Li Xiaoxian remained expressionless. An Liang squeezed her shoulder gently. "Why so quiet? Not happy?" Then he leaned close to her ear and whispered, "Let's go eat pickled cucumber beef sandwiches on Wall Street. I know a Mexican guy who makes them especially good, and we can add that spicy mustard you love." "Don't tell the ice cream man, okay? Come on, let's go." Li Xiaoxian smiled faintly, waved goodbye to Liu Zhongtang, and stepped out of the car with An Liang. An Liang walked briskly into Wall Street, chattering animatedly, almost overly excited, as he told Li Xiaoxian feng shui stories and jokes about every building number, his palm gripping hers so tightly it made her sweat. Li Xiaoxian didn't understand what he was saying, but she loved hearing his voice directed at her, and she cherished the secure feeling of his sweaty grip. The pickled cucumbers cut through the graziness of the beef sandwich perfectly. Yellow mustard smeared all over Li Xiaoxian's mouth, and as An Liang carefully wiped it off, he couldn't help thinking of his forever childlike younger sister, leading Li Xiaoxian up the upper slope of Wall Street, and Liang said, "We've reached the New York Stock Exchange. This is indeed Wall Street's most important dragon lair, but it's not flawless. There's another hidden feng shui spot stealing its wealth energy. Come, let's turn the corner and walk up step by step." Instead of heading straight to Wall Street's highest point, he turned opposite the exchange onto a narrow, sloping side street. This was Nassau Street intersecting Wall Street at a tilted cross. An Liang kept talking non-stop. The highest foundation of Nassau Street sits 1 meter higher than the start of Wall Street. From that vantage point, through the gap between buildings, you can see the exchange right at the intersection like a thief peeping. And who's that thief? Chase Manhattan Plaza? That gap is a wealth-leaking line, siphoning fortune from the dragon lair. A wealth-leaking line works like gambling. Whatever the player loses, the house wins. Right now, we're going to pay the house a visit. We've got a 2:30 meeting, so we've got time. We can take it slow. Taking it slow lasted only a few minutes. Soon, An Liang arrived at Chase Manhattan Plaza, a 60-story skyscraper, global headquarters of Chase Bank. Excluding Trump Tower's lightning rod trick to claim height records, this was the tallest building in the Wall Street district by actual elevation. An Liang led Li Xiaoxian confidently into the building. Then up to the 50th floor, an asset management firm furnished entirely in antique-style rosewood suites upholstered in leather. Had Li Xiaoxian been able to see, she would have thought she'd stepped into an 18th-century European furniture exhibition, steeped in refined aristocratic elegance. Inside the office, Li Xiaoxian heard a slow, slightly raspy voice with a thick Belgian accent. After exchanging brief pleasantries with An Liang and greeting her warmly, the man immediately got to the point. Li Xiaoxian learned his name was Davis, the head of Montreux Asset Management, and from his tone, she sensed he was a financier who weighed every move with deep deliberation yet struck with the precision of an eagle seizing its prey. And Liang didn't waste time either. He cut straight to the point. "I know Urban Bank will short the Straits Times Index of Singapore within a week. That's an opportunity for you." Davis spoke slowly. "No, that's not an opportunity. Urban Bank is one of America's top 10 banks. No hedge fund has ever swallowed a commercial bank. The truth is, we don't have that kind of power. Today's banking conglomerates are wealthier than entire nations. If Mondelez had that strength, I'd rather partner with them to strike Singapore directly. Do you have any better news?" An Liang gently squeezed Li Xiaoxian's hand. Although Davis's reply sounded humble, it wasn't the full picture. Mondelez Asset Management was indeed a hedge fund, but it housed many of the world's top traders. Moreover, this office floor wasn't chosen by An Liang like the David Group headquarters. He hadn't selected it at all. It had already been their location when they first signed the advisory contract. From various channels, An Liang knew Mondelez was originally spun off from Chase Bank. Legally, there was no connection, but historically, the ties were deep. Just like how Morgan Stanley emerged from the old J.P. Morgan Bank, they might look different on the surface. But in truth, they were twin brothers. An Liang understood the delicate balance of power in the banking world. Without strong incentives, no one would dare ignite such a fire. He replied immediately, "There's no better news. The Feng Shui layout of Montlay was set by me. Back in 2007, I already calculated you'd make a fortune during the subprime crisis, didn't I? But here's the bad news. Before the crisis ends, you'll face a major lawsuit. You could be charged with fraudulent trading, market manipulation, even aggressive shorting might land you in criminal court." Davis interrupted in a low, authoritative voice. "Short selling is legal." "Legal for now," and Liang shot back without hesitation. "Logically, everything seems fine, but problems always arise beyond logic. You know what laws really are. Once you anger the wrong people, new laws will appear just to convict you. Then the courts will hit you with massive fines until Montlay goes bankrupt. If you weren't worried about these unpredictable risks, you wouldn't need a Feng Shui consultant. You'd just hire a team of lawyers." Davis let out a low, rumbling laugh. "Ha. Sounds like you're trying to pressure and tempt me at the same time. Fine, what do you want? Will you tell me when the subprime crisis ends? That seems tied to my sense of justice. Remember my advisor? I'm not the type who only fires consultants." Liang understood Davis's meaning perfectly. This silver-haired elder was far from benevolent. He'd used his profits to build charitable foundations, but he'd also eliminated anyone who stood in the way of his wealth. His slicked-back hair and broad, powerful nose gave him the aura of a charging lion, capable of destroying anyone when necessary. But Liang felt no fear of life or death right now. If Li Shaoxin left this world, nothing else mattered. He might as well do something spectacular. If you know exactly when the subprime crisis ends, you can aggressively short mortgage-backed securities during that window and bleed Wall Street dry. And when your trial comes, I can ensure your justice remains intact if you're willing to drive Urban Bank's stock price down by 20% within 2 weeks. What do you say?" Davis responded quickly and firmly, "Impossible. We don't have enough capital to short a commercial bank with $100 billion in assets." Li Shaoxin felt Liang's tension through his grip. His hand kept gently kneading hers, growing damper by the second, until the pressure began to hurt. Almost as fast as Davis had spoken, Liang replied, "I know you can't do it alone. That's why I'll directly target Urban Bank's headquarters to help you. Just do your best. Even if you take losses, I'll make you whole and more within 3 months. If you agree, I'll set up an offensive Feng Shui formation for you immediately." Davis frowned. His thick, graying eyebrows nodded as he studied Liang for a long moment. Then he pulled a cigar from a French ebony humidor, lit it, sat up straight, and leaned forward. "I want part of the payoff up front, my advisor." Liang led Li Shaoxin toward the large window, and Davis followed. Before them stretched the southern tip of Manhattan, the concrete forest of the financial district shaped like a peninsula. Beyond it lay New York Harbor cradling the city, with the Statue of Liberty glowing green in the distance. The subprime crisis will worsen, but recovery will begin in 6 months. Davis sat upright and slowly exhaled a smoke ring, then said deliberately, "I see no chance of recovery. I saw through this market 2 years ago. Mortgage-backed derivatives will ultimately destroy Wall Street. The 1994 financial crisis also started with derivatives. There were already massive volumes of subprime mortgage bonds back then. This time is no different from 14 years ago. History always repeats itself. History is written by people, but honestly, isn't that good news for you?" Davis chewed on his cigar, lips twisted as he muttered, "Neither good nor bad, it's just market law. Are you here to teach me finance or Feng Shui?" Liang knew Davis had already accepted the terms. The old financier was merely voicing a reflexive demand. Every banker lived by the golden rule. A bird in hand is worth 2 in the bush. Only cash in hand was real money. He pointed downward and said, "Because of that bull, Wall Street will end this crisis next year." He was referring to the famous Charging Bull statue, a major tourist landmark in Lower Manhattan. Since its mysterious appearance on Wall Street in 1989, the bronze bull had become the symbol of Wall Street itself. Manhattan was a long, narrow peninsula, and Broadway ran straight down its central axis, the dragon vein of New York City. Because the entire city was laid out in a rigid grid, Broadway shot like an arrow from Midtown all the way to the peninsula's tip. This straight-line rush turned the once powerful dragon chi into destructive sha chi, granting Wall Street sudden windfalls but also condemning it to violent booms and busts. Liang explained, "In Feng Shui, the bull is called a chin star, specifically placed to guard wealth. When Broadway flushes wealth out to sea, the bull at the end facing against the dragon chi's flow rams it back inland. This configuration is known as Golden Bull subduing Sha. So the bull uses its horns to push invisible wealth back into Wall Street? That's strange." Davis said it like that, but there wasn't a trace of mockery in his tone. He'd worked with Liang for years, and Liang had never been wrong in his predictions, not in direction at least. What amazed Davis was how Chinese Feng Shui could solve such an intricate problem using methods as simple as a child's game. What he didn't know was that the truth was the exact opposite. Chinese Feng Shui used deceptively simple terms to conceal the endlessly shifting, profoundly complex relationships of yin-yang and the 5 elements. Liang turned and leaned against the window facing Davis. "When did the US government first start bailing out markets in history?" "Humph." Davis let out a low grunt, though in truth he was laughing. He understood exactly what Liang meant. This was Liang's best answer yet. The United States had always championed free market economics. Despite numerous economic crises over the past century, the government had never intervened, always letting the market correct itself. But in 1998, during the hedge fund crisis, the Federal Reserve stepped in to rescue the markets, an unprecedented move. Almost simultaneously, that massive bronze bull mysteriously appeared near Wall Street. Ever since then, whenever the US faced a financial crisis, the government would proactively step in to support the system. And Wall Street grew stronger with every blow, even bouncing back swiftly after the 9/11 terrorist attacks and quickly resuming its upward trend. At this thought, Davis chuckled again. Heh, then I can finalize my strategy for the second half of the year. If Mr. Davis would do me this favor, you'll encounter an unprecedented opportunity 3 months from now. What kind of opportunity? An Liang loosened his grip slightly on Li Xiaoxin's hand and exhaled, sounding relaxed. A chance for Montreux to expand its operations overnight by double. Next month I'll tell you more, and the generous Mr. Davis will surely engage in even more charitable endeavors, won't he? The Feng Shui gift, An Liang promised for next month, revealed his merchant-like cunning. After all, An Liang had only asked for a 2-week pressure campaign against Metropolitan Bank, meaning he was playing his cards as the situation unfolded. Davis laughed hoarsely, pointed his cigar at An Liang as a sign of agreement, and then turned to his secretary. Draft a rumor attributed to well-informed sources. Metropolitan Bank has hired a bad debt specialist to handle its $22 billion in subprime assets. 7 major hedge funds are bearish and preparing large short positions. Have the tech team release it online, make sure the source can't be traced. As the secretary turned to leave, An Liang called out to her. Oh, and immediately order 7 naturally round stones, each under 2 feet in diameter. Basalt would be ideal if not available. Granite is acceptable. The key is to have them delivered to the plaza beneath the building by noon tomorrow. The secretary nodded knowingly. This was the opening move of a battle and gave An Liang a bright smile before walking out. Back on shore from the Johor Strait, and Yun and Sister Jing immediately phoned Zhang Jiwen, urging him to urgently investigate historical infrastructure projects in the strait. When they returned to the Ministry of Defense, they found Zhang Jiwen pacing frantically around the conference room like an ant on a hot pan, clutching a set of blueprints. Officers of various ranks filled both sides of the long table, already deep in operational planning, but tangled in interlocking complications that prevented them from finalizing any concrete strategy. The moment Zhang Jiwen spotted Sister Jing entering, he rushed toward her, unable to keep his voice down. Sister Jing, your divination is truly divine. Thanks to your coordinates, we've now pinpointed the exact location. A map of the Johor Strait appeared on the large projection screen. Zhang Jiwen waved for the staff officers to quiet down and tapped the map with his pointer. We illegally hacked into more than 10 Malaysian government departments to get this. In 2007, Singapore and Malaysia discussed building another strait bridge to boost bilateral trade. Malaysia was eager. It even agreed to bend a strait bridge designed to accommodate our demands. They'd already reached the survey and drafting stage. But international complications derailed the talks, and the project ultimately collapsed. But here's something we never knew. They had a second plan to build an underwater tunnel beneath the Johor Strait. This tunnel proposal existed alongside the bridge plan, but since even the bridge deal fell through, they never brought up the tunnel idea at all. Now we've learned they'd actually studied the tunnel concept for a long time and had already begun experimental construction by an engineering firm. They assumed cooperation was inevitable, never expecting the bridge plan to be scrapped. With no chance to propose the tunnel afterward, construction halted almost as soon as it began.